Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're going to get started here in just a second. We'll give everyone about 2 minutes to start hopping in. We have some great content to review with everyone this morning and afternoon. Hi, folks. For those just joining, I'm just going to give everybody a couple minutes here to trickle in. Happy Thursday to everyone. Vicky, I don't know about you. I woke up this morning and thought it was Friday.
Yes, well, Thursdays are my Friday, so it does definitely feel like a Friday because it sort of is for me. So I'm looking forward to a long weekend, and the sun is shining in the UK, which always makes things much better.
Amazing. I can't say the same for Denver. It's a little cloudy here today.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Maybe you've given us your sun. That's what it
Love it.
is.
I love it. All right, team. I think we will go ahead and get started. We have some really exciting content to review today. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. You all are here for Marketing Through Market Disruption, Practical Strategies for Sustainable Growth. I am joined today by Vicky Conroy, our partners at SMRS, based in the UK. Our session today is going to explore how universities and institutions can shift from volume-led recruitment to value-led growth by focusing effort where it has the greatest impact. So excited to get started today. I have just one quick note that I want to touch on. SMRS are here today with AdCellerant in partnership. Just a quick note on AdCellerant, some background. We provide an end-to-end technology stack designed to make the complex simple. We combine the power of technology with human support, bringing unparalleled access to media, strategy, and data to our partners. And really, that's all I want to chat about AdCellerant this morning. I really want to make sure we have time to get to all of the great content today. So, Vicky, with that, I will pass it over to you to walk us through the webinar today.
Great. Thank you so much, Lauren, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Just quickly before we get started, there is a kind of Q&A function, so please do ask any questions as we go through. We'll try and answer them during the webinar, but if not, there will be obviously time at the end to go through some of your questions. So as Lauren very nicely set up this session, I'm Vicky Conroy. I'm a consultancy and insight lead at SMRS. We are a brand, culture, and comms business based in the UK, and we support clients across higher education, both in the UK and internationally. So, a little bit more about SMRS and what we do. Well, essentially, we don't see recruitment challenges as just marketing problems. They are very much rooted in culture, in proposition, in experience, and communication. And when these align, organizations perform better commercially and operationally. And we call this thinking bigger to do better. We've been around for nearly 30 years now, and as I mentioned, we support various higher education institutions and business schools across the UK and beyond. And here are just some of the clients on screen that we've been working with in that space. We also have another arm to our business where we help brands with their employer brand, but also to support graduate recruitment and beyond. And again, this is just some of our client base currently and more recently. So, to start the session, I'm going to dive in with some market context and really see the reality of the market that we're facing at the moment. So, to begin with, and you're obviously probably very aware of this, but the US is entering a sustained demographic decline. So, we're seeing that high school graduates, they peaked in 2025, and there's expected to be another kind of 10% decline through to 2035. The Midwest and the Northeast are expected to be hit the hardest here. Competition is intensifying for a shrinking pool, and the market is stratifying as well. So, elite and flagship institutions, they're remaining strong, but those kind of smaller privates and regional publics are really under pressure. And that can be demonstrated here on screen by a recent Wall Street Journal article that we found. There's a shift in recruitment focus as well. So we're seeing kind of more adult learners, transfer pathways, such as kind of community colleges, and the international student market is becoming much less reliable. So institutions, as a takeaway, must compete harder for fewer students and differentiate clearly. The other key thing to touch on here is the value crisis and the economic squeeze. So tuition is rising, but actually that willingness to pay is falling. There's declining kind of public funding and rising operating costs as well, which are also areas that institutions have to face and try and overcome. There's an increasing need for financial aid. And actually, in a recent survey, only 28% of finance leaders felt that they were confident in the long-term higher education model. As I mentioned on the previous slide, there is a bit of a student and learner trend and a difference, and that also goes along with a kind of mindset shift. So students are starting to think, is college worth it? Is it going to lead to a job? And there's this greater scrutiny on ROI and outcomes. And then finally, if we think about kind of policy and market disruption, there's loan reforms and earning-based accountability. Program viability is very much tied to graduate outcomes, and there is also a 15% projected drop in international masters enrollments as well. So this isn't about necessarily proving academic quality, it's about proving economic value as well. And then finally, the kind of big challenges out there is the change in demand and the institutional pressure that we're all facing. So students are really prioritizing career outcomes and skills and employability. There's a growth in shorter programs such as certificates, micro credentials. And again, that can be seen through that Washington Post article that we've got up on screen here. 4-year degrees, they're seen as expensive and prove a kind of slow ROI. So I think this is leading to some of that kind of growth in those shorter programs that we've mentioned. And there is a bit of a changing student profile as well. So more first in generation, working students as well, and adult learners are absolutely flooding the pipeline. From an institutional challenge perspective, there's obviously continual kind of budget pressure and declining enrollments, and that really does increase the pressure that we're all feeling in this market currently. So the takeaway here is about delivering kind of flexible, career-relevant education with that high-touch support, so that constant support for learners at scale, but at a lower cost. So, given the market we find ourselves operating in, the question becomes, how do we respond strategically rather than reactively, and how do we turn that pressure we're facing into progress? So at SMRS, we believe that there are 3 kind of core areas that can really shift the dial here. The first one being data-driven audience understanding, so utilizing all the data that we have access to really understand what your audiences want, who they are, where they come from, and what they need. The second area is around having a portfolio and a product base that is fit for the future. So again, linking very much to student demand, but also employer need as well, making sure that you're set up for the long term. And the final core area is around personalized and sustained experiences. So within that kind of application journey, that study journey and beyond, making sure that you're communicating with individuals on a personal level where possible, and ensuring that your brand experiences are consistent across that journey. So let's dive a little bit deeper into what we're talking about here. So from a data-driven audience understanding perspective. Now, in our experience, most universities that we've worked with or have spoken to have at least one of these issues, and more regularly than not, actually, a mix of these issues. So the first one being data overload. Organizations collect too much data, often without clear goals on how to use it most effectively, what's relevant, what's not. And without that structure, the data becomes noise, not value. Systems are fragmented with data sitting across multiple platforms, so CRM systems, your website, your social platforms, admissions teams. Again, they're not being integrated, and the results are quite siloed thinking for institutions. So, data analysts and marketers often operate separately rather than together. In a recent Marketing Week survey, 37% of marketers said that data analysis was their biggest skills gap. So, insight experts don't always feature in marketing teams, and it's an area that's included in other roles with big remits rather than a dedicated resource. Then we have lack of speed and agility. So this is often due to kind of team structures and other needs for data analysis, but the speed at which data can be analysed and used to make decisions is not fast, unfortunately, and timely usage is really key to driving impact. And then finally, analysis paralysis, which is definitely a mouthful there, but we sometimes have a tendency to overanalyze data, drill down, further and further until we're in this kind of analysis hole and nothing then gets done with our data findings. Question here is, are they the real problem? So actually, we think that we need structure in how we look at our data and our goals and a real clear sense of what we're actually trying to learn. We also need to progress our analytics maturity, again, really creating value and making data one of our most powerful assets. We have to move beyond the basics. Most analytics in universities today are still quite descriptive, so they tell us what has happened, and that can be things such as, looking at web traffic or click-through rates and application volumes. We start to unlock much more value when we move into this diagnostic insight phase. So when we start to link those metrics together to understand why things are happening and which behaviors or factors are driving those outcomes. From there, the next step is predictive. So if we understand what drives behavior, how can we use that insight to anticipate what's likely to happen next? And finally, prescriptive. So if we can see what's likely to happen, what should we do about it? How do we intervene? How do we prioritize? And how do we design journeys that improve conversion? Now, what we're all very aware of is that not all prospects convert equally, and treating them the same is inefficient and it's expensive. So it's important, therefore, to identify and prioritize the successful prospects. So if we think about high-performing institutions, they really understand this. They use their data to their advantage. They know where their students are coming from. They know their broader demographics, and they know their typical behaviours. We need to do a bit of a kind of shift here. We need to shift our mindsets from volume. So it's not about more and more applicants and building that kind of applicant pool. You can attract less applicants as long as they are the right type of applicant for your institution, and then you'll be in a much stronger position. So shift from that broad targeting to that kind of data-led focus targeting, and from generic messaging to personalized engagement, and thinking about application volumes, but that conversion efficiency, so more of the right type of applicant. So how do we move to this more kind of data-driven approach and lose that kind of broad targeting approach that we may have been used to? We feel that an institution should consider undertaking something like propensity modelling, where you look at your historical data to start to predict likelihood of enrolment, segment your audiences to identify those patterns and think about, again, who therefore is more likely to end up enrolling with you, what do they look like, and identify where to focus effort, so geographically, demographically, and behaviourally as well. Now, propensity modelling starts with receiving client application data, so through to enrolment, but also CRM data across a period of a minimum of at least 3 years. This data can include things such as the courses applied for, the grade profile upon entry, any kind of feeder schools or college insight you might have, CRM engagement, essentially anything you know and about an inquirer or an applicant, we would expect to see in that data set. We have so much access to data in the HE sector, but often we don't know how to use it, and that can make it feel quite overwhelming. So, within all that noise, we can find meaning and remove that feeling of not knowing where to start or what's important in our data sets. And this is where machine learning comes into play. So, it really does help find patterns in your inquiry, your CRM application, and enrollment data. And the model calculates kind of conversion probabilities to help predict how likely individual applicants are to enroll at your university and the variables which are more significant in predicting enrollment. So that eliminates some of that noise and really focuses on the data points that really matter. We can then use regression modeling to turn these significant data points into propensity-based profiles to support with targeting and recruiting the right type of applicant. And what's the impact of propensity modeling and kind of really understanding your data? Well, there's a significant reduction in cost per acquisition, which is always music to our ears. Strong increases in, click-through rates from advertising through to your website, and essentially a growth in the right type of application. To reiterate, the key point here is not needing more volume, but it is needing a better yield. So the second core area is around being fit for the future. So this is where many institutions are kind of still built for the past, actually, with regards to portfolio and aren't future focused. And it's a question that we're increasingly asking institutions because many portfolios, many structures and ways of working were designed for higher demand, for less competition, and actually more predictable student behaviour. But today's reality is very different. We're seeing, a more fragmented demand, greater scrutiny on outcomes, and students making much more deliberate, value-driven decisions. So many institutions are still carrying kind of legacy courses. They're overserving low demand areas or they're duplicating provision that doesn't differentiate. And being fit for the future isn't just about adding new courses, it's about making conscious decisions about what we're going to stop, what we're going to reshape, and what we're going to prioritize in terms of our programs. So this is just an example kind of framework of what we feel portfolio success looks like. And it's about asking different types of questions. So where are you now and what are the opportunities for you? So really understanding data again, volumes, data trends, performance, opportunities. Then thinking about what the future holds. So looking at the labour markets, undertaking pest reviews and seeing what political, economic, socio-technological factors are actually likely to impact your portfolio decisions going forward. And that could be both positively, but also negatively. So it's really worth being mindful of what's going on in the broader market. The other area is around demand. So where is the demand? And there's no better way to find this out than speak to prospective students. So get their feedback, find out what appeals to them, what their perceptions are of you as an institution and of your competitors, and what drives them when they're thinking about decision making. And then finally, where and how can you compete? So dive deeply into a competitor review. Look at your competitors' portfolios, their modes of delivery for different programs, how they position themselves, and their kind of core USPs to see where you fare. At its core, for us, we feel a strong portfolio is trying to achieve something quite simple, and that's the widest possible reach with the smallest, most focused set of courses. And you'll see on the screen here the phrase unduplicated reach. And what that really means is that each course is doing a very distinct job. It's reaching a very distinct audience, and there isn't that unnecessary overlap. So you're looking to have a clearer proposition to develop new programs which address both student demand and also employer need, and then more effectively utilize the resource and marketing efforts internally. And the third lever is experience, and this is often underestimated. So, if we think about improving experiences, we feel you need to understand them, and this can be done by mapping out customer journeys. So, looking at all of the touch points that your prospective students and your applicants go through in their journey to end up enrolling with you, whether that be, speaking to academics, speaking to peer learners, coming along to events, engaging with your social, your websites, any touch point that they might have with you, map that out and really understand how they're feeling at each of those experiences and what maybe needs to change to improve the experience that they're having there. Now, we know that mapping journeys and optimizing those experiences really is important and it does promote advocacy. So, you'll see a few quotes on screen here. So, first one being from Forbes, that actually engaged and satisfied customers are 4 times more likely to refer a brand. And also from UCAS, from a UK body, that 92% of applicants say that reviews are really important to their firm choice reply. If you really understand customer experience and the experience that you are pushing out, the expectations that prospects and applicants have at each of those touch points, you can really build competitive advantage. And actually, from Gartner, this stat shows that we are kind of there from a mindset perspective, and that 89% of companies do expect to be competing mostly on the basis of customer experience. It can also support with increasing progression. So, this visualization here looks at low levels of student satisfaction and the correlation that that has with a real kind of high level of dropout. Now, what we believe is that students don't actually choose universities, they're choosing experience. And again, there's a really kind of important mindset shift here. So, as institutions, we tend to think in terms of courses and rankings and facilities, but students don't experience you in that way. So, they experience you through your website, through your communications, through any events, your social content, conversations that they're having. In other words, their experience is about the journey, not about the structure. So when a student is making a decision, they're not just asking, is this a good university? They're asking things such as, what will it feel like to be here? Will I enjoy this? Am I going to succeed? Their decision making is emotional, it's social, and it is built across those multiple touch points that they're engaging with. Now, when we look at student decision making, it consistently, I think, comes back to these two core themes, and that's risk and belonging. So, first, if we think about risk, it's a really high stakes decision financially, socially, and in terms of future career. So, students are constantly then asking themselves, will I succeed here? Is this worth the investment? And can I trust what I'm being told by an institution? The second is around belonging and increasing belonging. And this is just as important, if not more so. Students are asking, do people like me go to this institution? Will I fit in? Will I feel comfortable? And will I be supported in my journey here? And importantly, these aren't rational checklists, they are emotional judgments and they are built over time. So even if an institution is objectively strong, if it doesn't feel right, then students will walk away. So to conclude this section, communications and experiences, they aren't just marketing, they are part of the product itself. So it's therefore really important to be consistent and personalised on the full journey a student has with you. And it's important to remember that change doesn't just come from insight alone. We need to action this change. So, if you're thinking, where do we start? That's a bit of an overload of information. Here are kind of three simple points. The first being exploring your data. Look at your data differently. Start to see what's available to you, analyze what it tells you, and how can you use that data to help with your recruitment. The second is around sense checking your portfolio. Now, I'm going to leave this screen up for a minute while I'm talking because we've put a QR code here. We've created at SMRS a portfolio diagnostic, which is a short survey of 10 to 12 questions. And it just asks you to think about your portfolio and how that's governed, the decisions that you make in terms of changing and increasing your portfolio. And at the end of the survey, it gives your institution or your business school a maturity score. So it tells you where you are in terms of that kind of portfolio maturity, and therefore what you might need to do to sort of shift to ensure that you're fit for purpose and have a portfolio that meets needs. So I'll leave that up on screen if anybody wanted to have a go and see where you fare in terms of that diagnostic. But think about sense checking your portfolio. Is it really aligned to real demand? What prospects want or not? And also, is it differentiated enough? One of the market context concerns here is around how competitive things are. So are you going to stand out to that market or not? And then the third is really important, and actually for me, probably one of the most important steps to take here is speak to your students and speak to that audience. If you have behavioural personas within your institutions, use them or update them, but really kind of drill down into understanding what your audiences need from you. And from a student experience perspective, start mapping your journey. Where are you reducing risk along those touch points, and where are you building that belonging? Also, where might you be unintentionally creating doubt, and how can you intervene? How can you redesign some of those experiences so that you are reducing that risk and you are making prospective students feel like they could belong at your institution? So, I'm going to say thank you and I'll stop sharing and we can move over to questions. But thanks everyone for your time and listening.
Thank you, Vicky. That was incredibly insightful. We'll take a look here for questions from the group. Any questions for Vicky and the SMRS team? Give folks a minute here.
Okay. Should we give it another few seconds and see?
Yeah, a couple more. Vicky, we did have one question come through here. How much historical data is typically needed to build reliable propensity models, and what happens if your data is incomplete or siloed? That's a great question.
That is a very good question. Ideally, when it comes to kind of propensity modeling, we ask for a minimum of 3 years. And that's really because it gives us enough data points to undertake the modeling on. And, things typically won't have changed sort of drastically either within that time. If your data is incomplete or siloed, it's absolutely fine. That's something, again, that we experience from most institutions, actually. We have a dedicated data team at SMRS, so we have data specialists who would remove any outliers or anomalies in data, transform it, cleanse your data sets, enhance with anything that again might help to understand the kind of characteristics and profile of a higher propensity or higher value applicant and student for an institution.
Incredibly insightful, Vicky. And certainly we know that data is so relevant and important. And I think the evolution of how universities have collected, stored, maintained data certainly is becoming more paramount over the years, but important to know that may be in a variable state over the last three, as you mentioned. Um, Here's another question for you, Vicky, that's come through. How is AI changing the way you build personas and campaigns?
Yeah, I mean, obviously AI is having a massive impact, isn't it, on everything that we do. As a business, SMRS, we undertake a kind of media mapper, we call it a media mapper survey, where we speak to prospective students about how they use different channels, social channels, education channels, and AI as part of their research to sort of understand at what points these different platforms and channels come in and where they're most important. Now, obviously, AI is up there now as a way to get information about institutions. So I think from a kind of building personas and campaigns, it's very much about thinking about the content that you're kind of pushing out because you know that prospects are going to be finding information out about you through AI searches. So ensuring that your kind of website is up to date, it meets the needs of your kind of typical high propensity and profile student, and therefore they can access that very clearly when engaging with all of your kind of different touch points.
Amazing. We've got quite a few questions coming in here, Vicky. Now, I think you've spurred a
Good.
lot of thoughtful
That's always
insights.
good to know. Just
One
take
more.
that first question, doesn't it? To
It always does. Here's one more for you. And this one's actually kind of same in the same thought as AI is I it was here and it is there a risk that data-driven targeting just leads to chasing the same high-value students as everyone else?
That's a really good question. I would say, whilst there's always a very slim risk, I think if you use your data effectively and combine kind of your historic data sets with more readily available kind of market data, then actually, when we do that through the propensity modeling, what we tend to see is that the profile of high value students does differ from institution to institution because you are utilizing historic kind of trends from in your institution and patterns and merging it with that kind of broader market data. So it is therefore very precise and personalized to you as an institution.
Amazing. Vicky, lots of questions here on data. To your point, it takes one question to kind of get the ball rolling. Many institutions have the data but struggle to act on it. What are the biggest organizational barriers you see, and how can teams realistically overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, from a UK perspective, and I would imagine you're probably experiencing the same thing in the US, but you're right. Institutions have a lot of data, but it is then dedicating the time and the resource to act on it and to make the right decisions. Um, in the UK, I would say that a lot of our institutions are not set up appropriately to be able to deal with the data that they have access to. So I think I mentioned it in the presentation today, but it might, data analysis or kind of insight teams, there might be elements of that within roles, much broader roles. So individuals have to cover, a real kind of broad spectrum of responsibilities within their roles. So actually, I think the biggest barriers there are that we're not structured in the right way to be able to access that data. If you had a team or individuals who can focus time on utilizing and understanding and transforming that data, you would really see power there. But until those kind of structural changes are made, unfortunately, it is very, very challenging.
Thanks, Vicky. One more question for you. And I know this is great insight that you've discussed as it relates to the US market, but are these learnings as applicable to the UK market as well?
I think so. I mean, before today's webinar session, when we were, looking at that kind of market context, the UK is in a very similar position to the US. It is becoming more competitive. Students are very much driven by the value that a degree brings. There is that financial risk, and that's impacting decisions in the UK, but more broadly as well in the US. So I think we are experiencing very similar challenges. And from as our business, when we approach working with new clients on different projects, we don't just work with UK institutions, I should say. We work with institutions across the globe. We've worked with some American institutions in the UAE and in Europe as well. And our projects are kind of very bespoke to that client. So geography isn't a factor. It doesn't matter whether you're from the UK or the US. We tend to have kind of robust discovery sessions and kickoff meetings before a project will start, and that really enables us to identify the specific requirements and objectives to that particular client and tailor accordingly.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Vicki, both for walking us through these findings. This was incredibly insightful and for answering these questions. This was fantastic. I'm going to give the group just one last out here. If there's any lingering questions that anybody wants to jump in on, we'll give it just 2 more seconds. But Vicki, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for your time in this wildly insightful presentation today.
Thank you. And thank you, Lauren, as well, and to the Accelerant team as well for the partnership. It was great to have you on board.
Fantastic. All right, I'm not seeing any additional questions come through here. Thank you all for joining this morning, this afternoon. We really appreciate the time. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you
Thank
all.
you. Bye-bye.